thanks, Radwan, for the introduction and for the opportunity this council and the attacks on the rule of law in Tunisia. Let me just start by explaining what's the Higher Judicial Council, what's the role of the Higher Judicial Council. Higher Judicial by the 2014 Constitution with two major mandates. One is to manage the career of judges, to ensure that the criteria and the procedures related to the appointment, promotion, transfer, disciplining of judges and prosecutors are conducted consistent with well-established criteria and in a way that preserves the independence of the judiciary. So managing the career of judges and also ensuring the institutional independence of the judiciary, ensuring that laws, policies, practices by the parliament, by the government are developed and implemented in a way that protects the independence.
ويحرص على أن القوانين التي تسن تكون حافظة لاستقلال هؤلاء القضاة.
You can hear the translation. فأعتقد أن the two elements, ensuring the individual independence of judges and ensuring the institutional independence of the judiciary, are the core elements or the core functions of the Higher Judicial Council. And because of the importance of these functions, government in general tends to attempt to take control over the Higher Judicial Council. In the history of Tunisia and also in the history of other countries in the region, Higher Judicial Council was presided over by the President,
يتأسف الرئيس في بعض الدول الأخرى ونائب الرئيس أيضا.
His intention to apply the Article 80 of the Constitution and to declare the state of exception. He also declared himself to be a chief prosecutor. That declaration was not reflected in the decree itself, and it wasn't reflected in the decree because the Higher Judicial Council at the time opposed such a declaration, reminded the President that the Office of Public Prosecutor is part of the judiciary, it's independent, and it cannot be under the control of influence or the direct control of the President. And that was the beginning of the conflict, or at least after the 25th of July, that was the first instance of open, direct confrontation between the Higher Judicial Council and between the President. What followed after that was a series of episodes that the President deemed to be inadequate or inappropriate for an institution that he considers to be, I think he considers the whole judiciary to be just, the judges are civil servants, that the judiciary is just functioned amongst the functions of the state, and that the judiciary is not an equal branch to the parliament or to the government. That's the general position of the President. And there were also instances in which the President declared, for example, by decree that he would suspend the financial allowances and other privileges of the members. The Higher Judicial Council reacted that they will continue to do their work anyway. And because the Higher Judicial Council said no to the President on numerous occasions, the President went ahead and dissolved or announced that he is dissolving the Higher Judicial Council. Why this declaration is problematic? One is that the Constitution itself does not even contemplate the idea of the Higher Judicial Council being dissolved. Under the Constitution, the President can dissolve the Parliament, for example. This is a constitutional procedure provided for by the Constitution. And the President has all power and authority actually to dissolve the Parliament if he wishes so. And that was something provided for by the Constitution. But the President cannot, not President or the authorities, there is no constitutional mechanism, procedure, or criteria for dissolving the Higher Judicial Council. Because when the drafter of the Constitution thought about the Higher Judicial Council or thought about the judiciary, they were thinking about it as an equal branch of government, as an institution that should be independent in law and in practice. And the only way to dissolve the Higher Judicial Council basically is to do it through a constitutional amendment. So none of these conditions or none of these criteria are there when it comes to the decision of the President to dissolve the Higher Judicial Council. He decided that it's going to be done through decree, which is unconstitutional, which has no legal basis, no constitutional basis, and which is counter to the basic principles of the rule of law, and which ends effectively in a semblance of separation of power. Now, the president over the past 6 or 7 months was engaged in a campaign of delegitimizing the Higher Judicial Council and the judiciary broadly. And the accusations were basically about the judiciary being a corrupt institution. In the beginning, it started just with some judges are corrupt, but with time, those some judges became the majority, and the accusations started being directed at institutions rather than individuals. So let's unpack a little bit the accusation of corruption that the president leveled against the Higher Judicial Council. When the president was in the Ministry of Interior and declared that the Higher Judicial Council is to be dissolved, he mentioned that some members of the Higher Judicial Council were receiving bribes and money from members to ensure appointments and promotion. And that's something that is just part of the smear campaign that the president was leveraging against, or was leveling against the Higher Judicial Council. There is no basis, no evidence that the members of the Higher Judicial Council were involved or have been involved in such misconduct, and to think that 45 members of the Higher Judicial Council are receiving bribes to appoint this judge in such a jurisdiction, or promoting or transferring a judge to another jurisdiction doesn't make such sense. There is another criticism, which I think can be valid or should be looked at in a more detailed way, is that there are delays in terms of dealing with certain cases or specific cases. And I think they were basically talking about 2 cases of former political opposition leaders who were assassinated, and that there were delays in terms of the investigation. I think the prolonged procedures within the justice system is a common problem, not related to 1 or 2 cases. Is something that all cases, all jurisdictions are dealing with. And the delays are related to the complicated procedures that exist within the legal system, but it's also related to the complex and sometimes conflictual nature and relationship between the various actors of the criminal justice system. So when we say that there are delays in terms of the investigations are conducted by police or by security forces that are effectively under the control of the Ministry of Interior, that are effectively under the control of the executive branch and therefore the president. And if there are delays at that level, that's not the responsibility of the Higher Judicial Council. We were also asking, or the president and supporters were also asking the Higher Judicial Council to intervene in individual cases. And it's important to highlight, from a rule of law perspective, separation of power perspective, judicial independence perspective, that the Higher Judicial Council cannot and does not have any jurisdiction or any powers to intervene in individual cases. And that's just the rule of law way, that you cannot, as an institution, intervene in individual cases or direct a judge or prosecutor to deal with the case one way or another. And if the Higher Judicial Council is to do so, then it would be an attempt, it would be an attack against the individual independence of judges, and us as organizations, civil society or bar associations or other stakeholders would be rightly so actually criticizing the Higher Judicial Council for such interventions. So to unpack, the reasons provided for by the president to dissolve the Higher Judicial Council are not valid. The procedure for dissolving the Higher Judicial Council is not based on the Constitution, is not based on the law, and and because I think it's important to highlight this point, is that the president is dissolving the Higher Judicial Council through decree. Even when such decree is published, such decree would be null and void and of no legal effect, because it has no legal or constitutional basis. However, the practice in Tunisia right now, since over the past 6 or 7 months, is that the president decides and armed and security forces give effect to such decisions. So de facto now we are having a situation that the lawlessness in the country is at a level that even the most blatantly unconstitutional, illegal decrees are being enforced and are being implemented. And we witnessed that in specific case of Parliament, when you had armed forces preventing the elected members of the Parliament who are representing the will of people from carrying out their functions. And we witnessed that just 2 days ago with the police preventing elected members of the Higher Judicial Council, the representative of constitutional institutions, to carry out their function. Moving forward, the president right now today, is talking about appointing a new Higher Judicial Council, a decree that would establish a new Higher Judicial Council. I think it goes to the heart of the question of the rule of law in Tunisia. Until the 25th of July, Tunisia was a country of institutions and of laws and of a constitution that is the primary source of legislation. After the 25th of July, we are in a situation in which the country is a country that is ruled by one man through decrees that lack any constitutional or legal basis, but that then these decrees are having or being implemented or enforced by security and armed forces. And when it comes to the judiciary and the independence of the judiciary, it is important to highlight that any new body to be established, that body would lack the legitimacy that is provided for by the Constitution, and that we have to be careful about the composition, about the mandate of such bodies. And I will just finish, I think, mindful of the time, by highlighting that the Constitution of 2014 and the revolution provided for numerous institutions that have the potential, if they've been implemented correctly, to establish the rule of law in the country. And the architecture, institutional architecture, was not completed because there are numerous pieces of legislation and laws that are impacting the judiciary that were not adopted over the past 10 years. The law governing the judiciary right now is the law of 67. That's from the time of Benarbia. And that law does not guarantee the security of tenure of judges. Judges are considered to be a civil servant, and if you are having a new body or new institution that gives oversight over the judiciary to the executive branch, we will see a situation in which judges will be dismissed, judges will be subject to disciplinary proceedings just because they are unwilling to comply with whatever the government are willing. And that would be the end of the rule of law. We are in a situation in which the Tunisian democracy is in an existential crisis. Through such initiatives by the president, we are dismantling, the president is systematically dismantling the very last institutions that can maintain some semblance of rule of law and separation of power in the country. Thank you.